Thank you. Feels good to be here. You guys are a vibrant, dynamic community. Like just the energy that I felt from the time I got here, I just am so grateful. So, yes, I am a recent graduate from the School of Ministry. I am in the process of taking my exams and then paneling to then eventually get my wonderful license as a reverend. But in the process of this, it has really been a profound experience of soul searching and figuring out who I am and what kind of ministry that I want to come to the world with. And so my talk title today is called Strong and Mighty. And I wanted to start and just kind of talk, because we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper. I hope you guys are ready, because I don't know any other way to do it. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something in the world that's happened recently that I just found so touching. And it's going to kind of go along with what we're seeing in the world that maybe might be of the form of effect to us. And so when you think about what happened just recently in Thailand, you guys all familiar with that? Right, really powerful. I just loved the dynamic of everybody coming together. Here you have these 12 boys, their coach, stuck in a cave. I can only imagine the cave being damp and dreary and dark and wet. And for 3 entire weeks with very little food, water, even oxygen, they said went down to about 15% for part of that time. And yet, the love and the pouring of humanity that came forward during that time was really powerful. We had people from all over the world saying, I'm going to show up and I am going to help because I know search and rescue and I'm going to become part of the team that's going to help save them. We had Navy SEALs coming and risking their life to save them. And after 3 whole weeks, they're safe. Right? Isn't that amazing? And I find such joy in these moments in history where people step up, where there's an energy and a vibration that's taking place that's really, really powerful, and we can feel it. If you think back in history and time, I mean, we had lots of different movements that have happened, and I think that's what we're kind of in the middle of right now, right? There's lots of movements that have been happening, from civil rights movement to Nelson Mandela and what he created, and to women's rights and the right to vote, and just all these different pieces that have come to play throughout history. And when we focus on how those pieces came into play, there's this concept that we learn in Science of Mind called race consciousness. It's this overwhelming energy that takes place when a group of people get together and think a specific way about a specific thing. And when this happens, this consciousness develops, and it almost becomes and takes on a form and a life of its own. Yeah. And so I've noticed that we're in a time right now of, shifting. Would you all agree? Now, the world's shifting, right? And people are very passionate about their points of view of certain situations and certain topics. And so as the world starts to shift, I start to think to myself, well, how are we showing up in that? So I don't want to necessarily talk about what that's happening, but how are we showing up in that? And I think there's something powerful when we're in the process of it, because in my opinion, there is a journey that's happening right now. There's a journey that's happening right now of us wanting to be something greater, transform the world, our lives, our community, right, the country, into something more dynamic, into something that has a different race consciousness. But through that process, right, we're showing up day to day in that, and it is having an effect at some sort, and we are having an effect on it. When I think of the principles of our teaching of Science of Mind, that there's a foundation that we are to be free from all discord, right? We're free from anger, free from pain and suffering, free from all of that. And we have the power, right, to create and change our lives to be free from that. There's another belief that we have, and that has to do with the soul, with that infinite presence within. And we believe in the eternality, immortality, and continuity of the individual soul, forever and ever expanding. Forever and ever expanding. So what that tells me is that my soul has come here on this earth at this moment, at this time, in this physical body, in this form, to learn and grow and expand so that I can become something greater. So that as it moves on, when this life form and this body is complete, it moves on to give a message and a vibrancy into the next, and it has learned and grown and developed from where we are here today. Yeah? Amen? Amen. So when I think of that, when I live in that, then suddenly what's happening in the world has a whole different perspective. It's a whole different perspective. Because if every single thing that's showing up in my life is showing up for a reason for my soul to evolve further, I can have a completely different viewpoint of it. There's power in what we're seeing and what we're hearing and what we're experiencing. And I think of things like are we able to sit and feel something? Are we able to have a reaction to something and actually live in the feeling of what's coming up for us? That's a tough one. That's a tough one. We don't usually like to sit in uncomfortable feelings, right? But again, if I go back to what I just said, and if the journey of the soul is to evolve, then maybe our individual expression of that is to have a greater understanding and awareness around why. You follow me? All right. So Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, says in The Words That Heal Today, when we forgive, no holding on to condemnation, judging no one, then our consciousness becomes a mirror reflecting that greater consciousness, which is the mind of God and the will of love. So we have this ability, right? We have this ability to kind of step into something greater. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm kind of debating with Ernie, that's what I call Ernest Holmes when I'm having a moment with him. When I'm debating with Ernie about this, I think, well, that's all fine and good, but how? How do I know it's showing up? How do I know that I'm in a moment where maybe there's a shift that needs to happen? I'm not always aware of it. I'm just kind of going about my life. I'm trying to be the best version of myself that I can be, right? And I think that there's some great ideas around how this concept might show up. And I think the biggest one is in our desire and need to forgive. To experience what it truly means to be in forgiveness. And that's a powerful one. And I want to do a sidebar and preface. When I talk about forgiveness, I'm not talking about making somebody else's what they did or said okay. I'm not talking about, allowing ourselves to be hurt in any way. That's not forgiveness. We're not forgiving for that reason. What they did, what they said, what they are showing up as is on them. I'm talking about forgiveness for myself. I'm talking about forgiveness so that I can become a greater version of myself. And the only way I can do that is by getting in touch with how I'm feeling, where there might be something that needs to heal. Because I firmly believe that forgiveness is the foundation of all mental illness, right? We can heal we believe in this teaching, we can heal our mind, we can heal our bodies. We have that power. But I believe that when we're sitting in a place that something needs to heal from a forgiveness standpoint, then all the other stuff can't happen because we're blocked. We're blocked. And so I was trying to think for myself, well, what would show up? How would I even know that I'm in a situation where I need to forgive? Let's say I'm on Facebook and my dear Aunt Sally decides to post some really crazy stuff, right? Really? Yeah, you follow me? And I'm totally feeling it, and I read it, and I'm like, oh, no, she didn't. She went there. I got to say something. I got to respond. I got to tell her what I think. I got to get up all in her business now because she's in my business now. She doesn't even know she's in my business now, but she is because she just posted that, right? We all have those moments where we see that stuff, and it could be very valid. It could be very right. We could be right? But so what? Does it matter? Like, does it really matter? What matters is that there's something going on here that I need to take a look at and shift my perspective on, because what she just did and how I'm feeling, they don't go together, right? So I was trying to think what would be the few things that I could give you, and I think there's 3 things that kind of show up in your life that make you think, okay, I need to take a look at that differently. And so you can walk away with these things. The first is, are you triggered? That's a sign that you need forgiveness. So triggering, that feeling in the pit of your stomach. You know, you might walk into your mother-in-law's house and you do the right? Because something gets said and you gotta breathe deep, right? That's a sign that you're triggered. Something just got said, something you just read, something you heard, and suddenly you're feeling this inner turmoil. And you know what's interesting about when you're triggered? You feel it in your body. It comes up in your body, like it's somewhere. If you pay attention, you're like, ooh, yeah. Your shoulders get tight, your stomach feels weird. You know, there's something that goes on. So the first sign I think of forgiveness is we're being triggered by something and we need to address it. The second is, are we in victim mode? I know. I still have trigger around that word myself. Like, I'm still working through it. So take away the victim word, because I know that goes for a lot of us, but just think of what being in that might be like. So when we are playing that role, we are right and they are wrong. You know, we are real, they are being fake. You know, we are smart, we know what we're talking about, they're dumb, they're stupid, they have no idea what they're saying. You following me? Yeah. But here's the trick. When we're smart and we're real and we're right, then they have to be dumb and fake and wrong. They have to be. Because we can't be in a victim mode and want to feel that we got to be righteous and we've got to be the one in charge, we've got to explain our position and we've got to own it and know without making somebody else wrong. It's a dichotomy. You can't. But here's the trick. When we're in that, here's your third tip that you know that forgiveness is necessary. That's when we like to tell our story. We all got our stories. I know. Over and over, right? You know the ones that you know them, that you repeat, And when we're living in the story can be profoundly powerful because we begin to create from the story. And we believe that we can create our lives, right? So if we're creating from a place of our story, of how we were wronged, of how this didn't go right, of how they're treating us, of how dear Aunt Sally just wrote the Facebook post of all Facebook posts, and now I need to go write 50 more to tell her why she's wrong, right? I'm in my story. I know I'm triggered. I know I'm in victim mode. All of it goes together. And so what happens is our soul can't evolve. Our soul can't grow. But what if there was a possibility that we could look at it differently? That we could be different in this situation and that maybe we could see certain situations from a completely different perspective. And that's when the shift really happens. So for me, a little while back, I was talking about forgiveness, and a friend of mine recommended a book. The book is called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. If you've never read this book, I highly recommend it. And I'm going to take you just briefly through what he talks about because it was profoundly different than forgiveness from any perspective I've ever heard it before, and it has freed me. What he talks about is when we begin to recognize where we need forgiveness, and we begin to recognize like we're being triggered, we're in victim mode, whatever, so that we realize there's something here, that it collapses the story because the awareness alone allows you to change perspective. And what he talks about is the perspective changes by not necessarily having you talk about it some more, but instead, now just hang on with me on this, looking at the situation as if it's a blessing. Different perspective, right? What if we took a situation and we decided that instead of seeing it from our own lens, that there maybe was a perspective of our soul in it? Maybe they're there to be a teacher, a great giver of greater understanding and awareness to us. And if that's the case, then I can look at this situation completely differently. So here's how he says this would kind of work in a nutshell. So now your dear Aunt Thelma, different aunt, has decided that, she has been for women's rights her whole life. This has been her thing, right? Women have been profoundly kept down. They are powerful. They should be lifted up. She has this perspective that, men keep them down, yada, yada, yada. You follow me? Now, your Uncle Ben decides on Facebook to post how men are the rulers of the free world, that they absolutely are in charge, and that women need to just know their place, and they need to zip it and just be, right? Okay. Now, I know that's, okay, I get it. A little funny, right? A little out there. Probably not going to go down exactly like that. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that that's the situation. Now, dear Aunt Thelma has a desire here to respond, but what if in that moment she decided to practice radical forgiveness instead? And what if she said, you know what? Ben, you are here to be a great teacher to me. I know that some stuff is coming up for me right now, and so what I am going to do is I am going to take a moment, because this has been coming up my whole life, people like you showing up trying to tell me how I should be in my, desire. And now, again, real quick, I'm going to take a sidebar for a second. If you believe in women's rights, hey, I'm with you. So this has nothing to do with that. That is my whole ministry, is empowering women to be unapologetic in their business and their life. That is what I do. So I am 100% for it. The trick I'm trying to get to you is it's what perspective you actually show up in when you're talking about it. So going back, right? We're back with Thelma. And Thelma decides that she's going to take a look at it. And in Colin's teaching of radical forgiveness, he would say, hey, let's take a second and let's go back. And let's think of the first memory that you ever had where maybe you were held down as a woman. Like, when was that? And she thinks about it and she says, well, I know when I was 5, I wanted to do a lemonade stand. And when I was going out to do my lemonade stand, I was all ready. I had everything made. I was going to make some money. I was going to show the world who I am. I'm a powerful woman, right? Because she saw, other people doing it. So she was excited. And her dad walks in the door and says, what are you going to go do that for? No one's going to buy lemonade on our street. Like, get back in there. No one wants to buy lemonade from a little girl. Can you imagine what the belief is that little girl developed at age 5? What belief did she develop? I'm not worthy. Men don't listen to me. I'm not going to make enough money. You name it, any belief could come out of that. Now, is it the truth of what actually happened? No. He just made a comment, but we internalize it as human beings, and at a very young age, it's very easy to internalize that to fundamental beliefs that we carry our whole life. Take another example. A 12-year-old puts on makeup for the first time. She's all excited. She's going to go out with her friends. They're going to go to the mall. She's passionate. She walks into the living room, and mom says, what do you got all that stuff on your face for? Get that stuff off of you. No boy wants to see you like that. It's too much. No. Right? What belief does she develop from that? So now you have Thelma with these beliefs that she's developed from very, very young age, and she's showing up in this world powerful. Everything in her life is about, making sure that women can stand up, making sure that there's power, making sure that we are fundamentally heard and seen, right? Get the correlation? Seen. that's where radical forgiveness can come into play, because we can go back and we can see that Uncle Ben is just a teacher. His soul was brought on this earth to touch and dance with my soul, right? If I'm Thelma, and to have a different conversation so that I can heal those beliefs, because they're not real. They never, the belief that was developed was not the truth of who and what Thelma is. And when she can approach life from that, suddenly what's happening on the outside is just happening. It's just happening. And now Ben, again, not condoning what he's saying or how he's saying it, right, in my example, but then Ben can be seen as a blessing in Thelma's life, because she gets to grow and develop. And then when she's now showing up, practicing her power and standing in who she is, she's doing it from a very different level of race consciousness. Are you following me? Right? It's a different level of power. It's a different elevation of humanity. And just with her making that shift, so much can happen. Now, I wish I was doing a workshop after this on forgiveness, which if I would have planned it better, I probably would have. But I do work on this all the time. And if you're interested in that, I would love to talk to you, because I think that as we grow and develop in our own lives, that there's lots of these ways that we can practice this to become stronger, better, and more of who and what we are. Ernest Holmes also says this. He says, spiritual awareness, whatever the mistakes of yesterday may have been, today is a new creation. Turning from the errors of the past and no longer carrying with us the sorrows and mistakes of yesterday, today we may enter a new experience. But it is only when we forgive ourselves and everyone else that we may feel certain that the weight of condemnation is lifted from our consciousness. That's what we're talking about, right? You know, we envision in this teaching a worldwide movement where we can radically practice forgiveness for anybody's errors, judgments, injustices, where practicing forgiveness is really just the norm. It just happens. That's what we want. And so in order to do that, we have to show up in our greatest version of ourselves, right? To be able to see that somebody else should be forgiven even when we may not necessarily agree with their methods. Now that's powerful. That's healing. That's going to evolve our soul. That's going to change all of the world and humanity. So when we get an opportunity to gain greater awareness, then suddenly in our lives, just our daily lives, we show up different. You know, we become better mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and employees and just people, because we have decided to take anything that's showing up that maybe triggers us, we don't like, doesn't feel right, is uncomfortable, and take a look at what could my soul want to learn from this. And suddenly, the stuff that's showing up, it's something you can get through so much easier. It's something that you can see so much clearer, and you can live a freer life. And so that's what my hope for you is that as you go through your life, that you get an opportunity to really experience what it means to forgive from the soul. Because when you do, it is pure peace. It is pure peace. We always want to know, what does it feel like to be in peace? Take a moment and see a situation in your life differently that has maybe haunted you forever, and suddenly you will feel true peace. I love you. I thank you for having me, and so it is.